Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well as usual. Today I want to talk about caffeine. Now, caffeine is up there as one of the most used drugs in the world. In terms of the caffeine derived from coffee itself, around the world, approximately 2.25 billion cups of coffee are consumed on the daily. This highlights caffeine's integral role in daily routines and social rituals that occur worldwide. In today's video, I wanted to have a chat about caffeine and explore why it is such an essential part of our day-to-day lives, as well as possibly exploring some protocols that may help us optimize the effectiveness of this psychoactive drug. Let's get into it. So what is caffeine? Now, caffeine is a natural stimulant, which is most commonly found in teas, coffee, and cacao plants. I don't know if that's how you say it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Its main use is to stimulate the human brain and the central nervous system, which can heighten alertness and offset the feeling of tiredness. Now, caffeine belongs to a class of compounds which are known as methylxanthines, methylxanthines, all of which work to stimulate the nervous system. Caffeine's unique molecular structure allows it to bind to adenosine receptors within the brain and exert its effects. We'll explore this in deeper detail in a bit. Before we jump into the science behind caffeine and how it works exactly, let's talk about the molecule that it competes with. Now, this molecule is known as adenosine. Adenosine is a nucleoside molecule, and nucleosides are precursors to nucleotides, and nucleotide molecules are precursors to RNA and DNA, which are essential molecules for us to live. Now, adenosine is produced naturally in every cell of the body and plays several crucial roles in human biochemistry, with one of its primary ones being energy transfer as through ATP and ADP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and ADP is adenosine diphosphate. And the difference between the two is one has three phosphate groups, one of them has two phosphate groups. Adenosine is primarily formed through the breakdown of adenosine monophosphate, so one phosphate group. And this process is complicated, and it involves several steps of changes that occur at the cellular level within our bodies. Now, adenosine functions as a neuromodulator in the brain and has several important physiological roles, which include sleep regulation, vasodilation, which causes blood vessels to widen, improving blood flow and oxygen delivery to tissues within the body, anti-inflammatory effects, in which it reduces inflammation and modulates immune function, as well as heart function, in which decreases heart rate and has a protective effect against myocardial ischemia, which is a condition in which there is a reduced blood flow to the heart due to the buildup of plaques within the arteries. So adenosine is a very, very important molecule for our function. In terms of the receptors that adenosine bind to within our bodies, they are extracellular receptors, so they're located on the outer layer of the cells, and there are four different receptor types for adenosine, and these are each found within different body systems and areas, and each have their own special function. So these include A2A receptors, which are found in high concentrations in the brain, the heart, the lungs, and the blood vessels. And when adenosine binds to these receptors, it promotes vasodilation and anti-inflammatory effects through the stimulation of adenylate cyclase, which is an enzyme that converts ATP or energy into cyclic AMP. Now, cyclic AMP is a key molecule for cellular signaling within the body. Next up, we have A1 receptors, which are found in the brain, the heart, adipose tissue, and kidneys. These work to decrease cyclic AMP levels, leading to sedative effects and vasoconstriction, which is the tightening of blood vessels to reduce blood flow within tissues such as the kidneys in order to redirect blood flow to other tissues that may need more blood. Next up, we have A2B receptors. Now, these receptors are found in the intestines, the lungs, and in blood. And when adenosine binds to these receptors, it promotes immune responses and inflammatory processes, which will see greater activation amounts when pathogens or sickness occurs within the body. Finally, we have A3 receptors. These receptors are found in the brain, the liver, and in immune cells. These work to provide cardioprotection, and they also produce anti-inflammatory responses when the body needs them most. Receptor binding of adenosine can get quite complicated, so a simplified explanation of this is that adenosine diffuses throughout the extracellular space and binds to its specified receptor. Once bound, the receptor activates associated proteins, which dissociate and interact with intracellular proteins, meaning inside the cell, leading to changes of certain levels of messengers, such as cyclic AMP, as mentioned before, which ultimately results in a physiological response through cell signaling processes. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering how adenosine and caffeine intertwine and affect each other. So, if we're being specific, caffeine competes with adenosine for the binding of the A1 and the A2A receptors that I talked about before. So when binding of caffeine to these receptors is successful, caffeine prevents adenosine from inducing its sedative and vasodilatory effects. And as a result, blockage of the A1 receptors reduces the inhibitory effects on neuronal activity, which in turn leads to an increase in the amount of neurotransmitters released in the brain, such as dopamine and noradrenaline, which furthermore enhances alertness and reduces the feeling of fatigue. Blockage of the A2A receptors occur within the striatum of the brain, an area of the brain associated with our motor control and our reward system, which contributes to the stimulant effects of caffeine by influencing dopamine signaling. So the activation of these signaling pathways within the brain may actually explain its addictive effects that caffeine has on a lot of people, and why it is one of the most consumed drugs in the world. Caffeine can actually also curb hunger, and it achieves this through several mechanisms, including stimulation of the central nervous system, which can temporarily reduce the feelings of hunger through the release of, certain neurotransmitters such as, dopamine and norepinephrine or noradrenaline. Stated before, thermogenesis, which is the process by which the body generates heat and burns calories. So when our body burns more energy, this may suppress our appetite because the body is using stored energy rather than signaling for more food intake. And caffeine promotes thermogenesis. Our ghrelin levels are also impacted as well. Now, ghrelin is the hormone that signals hunger to the brain, and some studies suggest that caffeine can actually reduce levels of ghrelin within our system, which can lead to a reduction in our hunger signals. This effect, even though it is it's temporary, it can actually make us feel less hungry after consuming caffeine. Caffeine can have influences on fat metabolism. So as caffeine increases the release of free fatty acids from fat tissues through a process called lipolysis by mobilizing stored fat for energy. Caffeine can actually reduce the need for food-derived energy in a short-term window, which in turn can lead to a temporary reduction in appetite. Another thing to note is the process of delayed gastric emptying, as caffeine can actually slow down the process of gastric emptying, which means that food can stay within our stomachs for a longer period of time, prolonging the feeling of fullness, reducing the urge to eat more, curbing hunger. So the main sources of caffeine from everyday sources, that is, include coffee, in which a typical 8-ounce cup contains about 95 milligrams of caffeine. We also have teas, which varies in the amounts of caffeine depending on which one you drink. For an average cup of black tea, you're looking at around 47 milligrams of caffeine, while green tea, it comes in a bit lower with around 28 milligrams on average. Soft drinks usually contain around 30 to 40 milligrams per caffeine, milligrams of caffeine per can. Energy drinks can contain anywhere from 50 to 300 milligrams per serving, and chocolate is also another source of caffeine depending on the brand and what kind of chocolate you buy. For those who are interested in like a pill form, caffeine pills are available on the market for a more pure hit of caffeine too. Now, one of the topics I wanted to touch up on was caffeine and our sleep-wake cycle. So our sleep-wake cycle is regulated by a combination of circadian rhythms, which are basically the internal biological clocks that we have, as well as sleep homeostasis, which is the body's pressure to sleep. So a key player in sleep homeostasis is adenosine, of which we talked about before. Now, adenosine accumulates within the brain throughout the day, and as adenosine levels in the brain increase, they actually promote sleepiness by binding to adenosine receptors in the brain, specifically the A1 receptors we spoke about earlier. Furthermore, after binding, adenosine works to inhibit neuronal activity and induce feelings of drowsiness. When we introduce caffeine into the mix, the brain doesn't receive its signals to slow down, which in turn can lead to states of heightened alertness and a possible disruption of sleep. So, caffeine also increases sleep latency, which is basically the time it takes to fall asleep. This is because adenosine's normal accumulation and signaling are blocked, which in turn makes it harder for the brain to recognize the need to sleep. Caffeine consumption can alter the architecture of our sleep as well, reducing the duration of slow wave sleep or deep sleep. And basically, slow wave sleep is crucial for both physical and mental restoration, and its reduction can affect our body's ability to carry out these processes. Caffeine can also decrease the total sleep duration and can also reduce the amount of time we spend in REM sleep, which is important for cognitive functions such as memory consolidation and overall brain health and mood. Research has shown that caffeine, particularly when it's consumed in the later hours of the day, can delay the onset of melatonin production, which is the hormone that signals to the body to prepare for sleep. So the shift in the timing of melatonin release can cause difficulty in falling asleep at a regular time, and in turn can disrupt the natural sleep-wake cycle that we have. A study done by Harvard University showed that caffeine can delay sleep timing by up to 40 minutes when consumed 3 hours before bedtime. Another study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine found that caffeine consumption 6 hours before bedtime, so as late as 6 hours, can actually reduce total sleep time by more than half an hour. The Natural Sleep Foundation indicated that habitual caffeine use, especially in high doses, can lead to chronic sleep deprivation, as the individual may not fully compensate for the sleep lost due to caffeine-induced sleep disturbances. I want to go over the potential health effects of overconsumption of caffeine. Everything in moderation, remember. So, the long-term effects of using caffeine to stay awake and alert can lead to a cycle of sleep deprivation and an increased dependence of caffeine due to the activation of the dopamine pathways in the brain. As sleep quality progressively declines, individuals may start to consume more caffeine to combat daytime fatigue, further worsening the disruption to the sleep-wake cycle. Over time, this can lead to a diminished cognitive performance, mood disturbances, and furthermore increased risk of serious health issues such as cardiovascular disease and metabolic disorders. Individuals who are more sensitive to caffeine may find that higher doses can lead to overstimulation of the nervous system, which in turn can lead to negative feelings such as feeling really nervous, jittery, or high levels of anxiety. Now, caffeine has a diuretic effect, meaning that it increases urine production by acting on the kidneys, and as a result of this, one can experience an increased amount of urination and furthermore potential dehydration if caffeine consumption isn't properly balanced with adequate amounts of water intake. Caffeine consumption stimulates the release of catecholamines such as adrenaline and noradrenaline, which can temporarily increase our heart rates and our blood pressure. And just something to note, for individuals with pre-existing or underlying health conditions, this may be a concern when consuming caffeine. Now, despite these adverse health effects, caffeine can still serve as a powerful tool for productivity and mood. So here are a few protocols that we can use to optimize caffeine consumption. So these include the timing of consumption. It may be beneficial for some people to consume caffeine in the late morning or early afternoon when natural cortisol levels begin to decline. Now, cortisol is a molecule that we make, which keeps us naturally alert, and it's at its highest levels when we wake up. So when we wake up in the morning, for the first few hours of our day, our cortisol levels are relatively high, and towards the midday and afternoon, cortisol levels naturally decline. Avoiding consumption of caffeine is immediately when we wake up can ensure we don't interfere with the body's production of natural cortisol. To prevent sleep disruption, avoid consuming caffeine in the late afternoons or evenings, as the half-life of caffeine is 3 to 5 hours, meaning that it can stay in the system for up to 10 hours depending on the individual, meaning that even early afternoon consumption can have significant effects on sleep for some people. The next protocol that we can use is moderation and cycling. So staying within the 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine per day can actually maximize benefits while minimizing side effects. So consuming more than 400 milligrams per day increases risk of developing jitters, anxiety, and sleep disturbances. Regular caffeine use can lead to tolerance and furthermore dependence, as its effects diminish over time and we get used to its effects. So by cycling caffeine or by using it only on certain days and taking periodic breaks, we can maintain its effectiveness without developing a dependency to caffeine. Finally, we have caffeine sensitivity, hydration, and specifying the use for caffeine. Now, since caffeine can have a diuretic effect, it's important to ensure that adequate hydration is occurring along with the consumption of caffeine. Some individuals are more sensitive to caffeine than others due to certain circumstances such as genetics, weight, and as well as your tolerance levels, of course. So it's essential to recognize your sensitivity and adjust your intake accordingly. If you start to experience negative effects, reduce the total amount of caffeine intake or spread it out in smaller doses throughout the day, and reserve caffeine for times when you truly need it, such as before important tasks or a large workday, or even pre-workout as well. This allows for optimization of benefits as well as optimization of cognitive and physical performance without building a dependency on the drug. So that's going to do it for today's video. That's all about caffeine and its effect on us, how it works, how it competes with adenosine, and a few protocols that we can use to help optimize its effects. As always, everyone has a different makeup, from lifestyle factors to genetics, meaning that caffeine has different ways that it can affect us. So it's very important to go through a trial and error phase of caffeine consumption to figure out what methods and ways of consumption work best for yourself. Overall, caffeine can serve as a powerful tool in enhancing workflow as well as focus and mood. However, it must be used optimally for one to see the benefits. As always, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to stop on in and watch this video. Hopefully you've learned something new or gained some new insights that you can use in your day-to-day lives. If you found the video useful, consider leaving a like and sharing. Cheers. Until next time.